I'd love some more specific areas I can change and just general advice, areas where I can improve alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I did a deep dive on your site, worked up a bunch of notes here. So I'll go into some specifics and then some, bigger picture stuff, as well as like some strategic advice on what the next steps are and kind of how to engage the audience that you're looking for. I reviewed your questionnaire and everything that you're kind of aiming to accomplish. And I think there's really some simple kind of first steps that will make a huge difference here. So, we'll kind of dive into all of that as well as I get through this.
Okay.
A little bit about me. I mean, if you know a little bit already, that's great. But right now, I'm working as a senior producer at Wonderful Machine as well. Started with them as a consultant in photo editing, as well as the marketing consulting department. So I kind of have a little bit of everything going on here. And, I'm going to bring that kind of expertise to talking about the website with you as well.
Okay.
So just want you to know you're in good hands.
Okay.
And we'll
I
cover
appreciate
everything.
that. Great.
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen here and we'll just dive right in.
Okay. Sounds great.
And let me know you can see everything all right here.
Yep. I got your screen there.
Cool. Let me get rid of this guy. So first things first, I know that this is something you had already mentioned in your questionnaire, and that, was kind of a note that caught me as well, like as a big thing to address first, is the randomization of the galleries. So not necessarily the overview page here, which I'm going to kind of bounce around back and forth between different things. I'm going to talk about the galleries themselves, as well as like the UI and navigation and all that. But for now, that's the first thing I wanted to address, is like, once you jump into your portfolios, whether it's this page or going into lifestyle, for example, I know that currently the template randomizes these images, right?
Correct. All
So
but
I think
the home page. That's the only gallery that's not randomized.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's fine for, the homepage. I think we'll talk about like the presentation of the landing page, but in terms of the galleries themselves, I think that a great first step is to kind of kill that randomization. They're randomizing on refresh. So I think that kind of disrupts like a storytelling aspect, and it kind of undermines your control of these images in the way that you're kind of presenting them to the audience. Like ultimately, we can't discuss in too much detail what's really like working or not working for gallery flow until that randomization feature is kind of replaced with curated edits. And, I would suggest down the road probably doing a full web edit to nail down those aspects. But in the meantime, I'll give you some specific guidance on what I'm seeing is working and not working in certain scenarios, so that you kind of have a baseline to work from.
Or maybe just your thought process example is how you could arrange them and what a producer might look for in a storytelling. I think is something I haven't looked into real deep yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some screen grabs of things and made some notes. So I'll review all of that as we kind of work through the galleries. But really, my recommendation here, the first recommendation would be, disabling that randomization and using, custom sequenced edits in each gallery to kind of follow a visual rhythm, essentially. You want to start strong, show the range of your work, and then finish memorably. You're losing that control with the randomization. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I think that, you could work with a photo editor, obviously, to curate these selections, or you can kind of just, start to make these edits yourself and build upon that. Obviously, a consultant can help you nail down the best way to craft those sequences and improve that overall presentation. But there's plenty that you can do on your end as well, based on, any feedback that I'm giving you here today too.
Okay. One thing I wanted to mention, if we have time towards the end of the call, I was trying to play with order. It's something that's very new to me, and just trying to get something that flows in a way that shows the variety of my work. I have a couple examples. Maybe I could show one to you and just quickly walk through it and see areas where I can improve.
Yeah. Do you want me to pull it up on my end, or do you have it on yours?
I have it on my end. Let's see.
I'll give you control and you can.
Yeah, sounds good.
Take over.
I think I can prevent that. And just any first tips, feedback, it
Yeah,
should
absolutely.
be. So I've been playing a little bit in the background on the staging side, just trying different things. So this is one I changed a few of the landing images, but I did a slight refinement of categories up here.
Oh,
I
great.
gave a little
Okay.
bit more white space, and then this is the order I came up with. I also developed this here, which is a nice way to drag and drop images. So if it's
Yes.
easier to play around with this, it's the same order as here, but this is more a presentation mode.
Yeah, and this is great to see, because this was actually in my notes, is that in terms of your template, web template, I was going to say it'd be nice to see a little bit more breathing room between the images, to kind of give them some space and help that sequencing. Because, when you have everything crammed together, it starts to kind of blend in a way that can kind of create some fatigue from the viewer's end, if they're not sure, what that rhythm is, that pacing. And the other nice thing about this is I always go for simplicity in web design and templates like this, where, you can do more with less in a lot of scenarios. So even if you end up being a little bit more aggressive with your edits and cutting out some of these images, you're kind of filling that void with some breathing room and some more impactful images. I always say, like, start with a very tight edit of all the strongest work, and let that kind of do the talking for you, and then kind of build upon that, rather than trying to have too much in each gallery. So for something like this, this is something that I think is working well. I'm seeing a lot more consistency in the editing as well, like in terms of post-processing. Color temperatures are better here. And that was something that I had noted as well, is you want to develop a consistent kind of editing style, where you're focusing really on having this same kind of tone and feel to each image in each gallery. And it's okay if it changes a little bit between galleries, but there are some scenarios where you might have an image that is processed way differently than all the others around it, and it can really kind of throw a wrench in the overall flow of the gallery. And I have some examples of that in screenshots that I'll show you.
That would be great. It's something I haven't fully picked up on yet, and I'm trying to create a more cohesive just editing style. So if there's any areas you could point out, even here, if there's any standouts, I think I actually pulled a couple out. I felt like it flowed together pretty well, but some of, like, the bright red stood out. It didn't really flow with this more pastel tone. I don't know if I should re-edit them, or if it's something maybe just a rearranging could help with.
Yeah, I think it could be either. I think that the one thing you'll see here, like in that first row, is you do have that warmth, that kind of California West Coast kind of warmth there. And then it gets a little cooler in the images of the children.
It does.
So maybe that's something where you separate that and push it further down, or you go back and put some warmer tones in those images. But overall, I think these as lifestyle images are working well in terms of the content, the different variations in poses and scenery and stuff like that. I will say, and that was a note that I had, was try to incorporate more variation in the galleries and avoid things that feel too like visually similar. I think in one of the lifestyle gallery that you have currently, or at least in one of the randomization instances, there were some images of, like, maybe the two younger girls that are friends or sisters, maybe, that were right next to each other, and it felt so similar that it kind of muddied the presentation. And I know that that's not going to show up every time like that, but that's just something to keep an eye out for when you do kind of curate your custom sequences. And I have a screenshot of that I'll show you, so you know exactly which ones I'm talking about.
Okay, I get that. Should I hand the screen back to you here?
Yeah, here, I'll take over, because then I can show you exactly what I was looking at.
Perfect. I appreciate that. That's helpful.
So let's see here. I'm going to pull up my screen grabs. So I'll go through my notes here on all of these, but let me go down to so in one of the randomization instances, like, you had these images appear next to each other. And I think that it's almost too similar. Like, it's, the two girls hugging. And I know that this is obviously randomized, but I would say, remove one of these from the gallery altogether. I think this one here is a stronger image personally. So I might pull this one out of the gallery altogether And and I think I saw this one actually in your updated edit there, which is good.
Okay, I see exactly what you mean though. And going back, the reason I did the randomization is because I didn't really know how to put them together, so it was more like trying to see what works. But yeah, randomization probably isn't the best choice when you're trying to be more strategic
it'll
with the ordering.
create exactly. It doesn't give you as much control when you're trying to kind of drive a narrative, especially with like the direction you're looking to go in, which is more high-end commercial advertising. They're going to be looking for storytelling and your ability to kind of craft narrative with the images. So you want to be able to show that you have an understanding of, even if they're from different projects, which images kind of sequence well together, how you're getting across different emotions and different scenarios. And doing that in a curated sequence is always going to give you more control and kind of show off your creative capabilities more than having a randomization scenario.
Right, that's a good point.
And also, you don't know what everybody else is going to be seeing every time they're going on that gallery, just like you wouldn't know. If you refresh your page and it randomizes and that sequence isn't as good as the one that was there the last instance, then you've kind of lost that control.
Right. Real quick question. Those big full screen splash images, are those okay to be randomized? I feel like if someone refreshes and always gets the same one, it's a little bit.
Yeah, that I think that's the exception where it is fine. And that was something that I had noted is, I think this is great to have on your landing page, just a tight edit of really strong images to kind of pop up and go through, in random order is fine. I would be careful about what you're showing here. I had noted that maybe these two of the actresses, they don't feel as commercial. They're really beautiful images, but they feel more kind of like a fine art or almost like about the post work on these, where it doesn't have as much of as a commercial viability. So I might look out for those. Potentially that's something you want to tuck into a gallery somewhere rather than featuring them on the landing page.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that going forward, and we can jump back to the landing page here, is in terms of how this ends up. I think, like you said, having this randomization, that's fine. The overview, I think this is okay. I'd like to see these a little bit larger. So maybe in your template, like these are a similar size to the rest of the galleries. They feel a little bit compressed here. Or
they are smaller
almost,
in that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that they'll have more impact if you kind of have this a little bit larger, and maybe it's even just a couple less images. Maybe you're just focusing on maybe 5 to 6 really strong images in this masonry grid style, and you could also have some more breathing room between them. I had noted too, watch for this edit as well, because I know you're trying to show a broader range of the type of work you're doing. Obviously, some travel, some lifestyle, some children and portraits and stuff like that, as well as your aviation stuff. But the one thing I will say is you have all of these lifestyle images here and children and families and, travel and vacations. And then one sore thumb helicopter image that sticks out. That's a really nice image, but it just doesn't feel like it fits in with this edit. Because if I was a client coming to this page, I'd say, okay, this is a lifestyle photographer. They're doing some travel stuff. Obviously, has capabilities with children, showing education, different emotions, people interacting. And then also, I guess they shoot helicopters. I would say maybe mix this in, maybe a few more aviation images, and maybe it's aviation images that have a bit more of a narrative component to it rather than just being the helicopter or the airplane or something like that. And jumping to the aviation gallery, even something like this, where it's someone interacting inside the cockpit, the pilots themselves, rather than, the traditional helicopter image. Even though, yes, this is a really strong image and I think it belongs in this gallery, I think it just doesn't sit well in that overview gallery.
Okay, that makes sense. And the aviation side is a little bit different from the travel and lifestyle I'm really trying to focus on. I also have a passion for that aviation, and as a pilot, it's really fun for me.
Yeah.
Is there a way to tie that together more seamlessly?
Yes. So I think that a lot of that, obviously that is a, huge component. It's a big specialization too, because there's not a lot of
Yeah.
people that shoot
Hmm.
aviation like that. And I think
Right.
that it would be, you don't want to lose that from your presentation. I think that there is a path to kind of incorporating some of that into your kind of travel and lifestyle stuff. And I'll touch on that a little bit later, because there's some ideas that I had bouncing around that might be maybe personal projects or ways to work in some of this other type of specialization into the aviation stuff as well.
Okay.
But yes, I think it has a place, and I think that there's a way to kind of curate these in a way that will more seamlessly kind of blend with the other type of work that you're doing. It would just be a matter of potentially doing some personal projects or taking some, additional shots next time you're on a project that involves the helicopters or planes.
Yeah,
Or
that would be great if you have insight on that. And I'm looking for areas where I can do more test shoots, personal
Yeah.
projects to fill in voids and tie things together. So any input you have on that.
Yeah,
Would be
absolutely.
great.
When we get to that gallery, I'll go through a few thoughts
Okay.
that I had for that.
Great.
And then, I think coming back to the editing style and stuff, like you have pretty consistent editing on this page. Like a lot of these feel like they're processed similarly. They have that warmth to it. Even the ones that do have a little bit of a cooler tone to them are kind of interspersed in a way that feels like it kind of goes together. So I think overall, this edit is pretty strong, aside from the one that's just standing out as the helicopter.
Okay.
Other than that, I think that this overview page is good for this edit.
Okay. Real quick
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'll continue to your thought too. The aqua ocean, go up just a little bit. I felt like that didn't go, and it's the back of the gal's head holding the drink, the other in the tube.
Yes.
The colors didn't go to the one next to it. I played with it quite a bit. This is as best as I could get, but what's your just quick input on that color combination? Maybe integrating it better.
I think that this image works here, but it should probably be somewhere else in this edit, because I think the conflict that you're seeing is that this water texture is right next to the ocean texture here, as well as up here with the lake. That I think is creating some inconsistency, because obviously pool water is going to look different than the ocean and a lake.
Right.
So I think maybe the issue is not necessarily the processing on this, but just its placement in relationship to these other images of water.
Okay.
Like you're seeing here, and maybe it's something you didn't even realize at the time, but the first 4 images here all have water in them, and that
was my way of tying it together. Yeah. But I didn't love it.
Yeah. I think that it's subconsciously kind of showing the inconsistency of like the different textures between these different types of water here, that they might do better if they were separated a little bit. Like maybe this one comes down here, maybe this one comes in the middle somewhere. This one could maybe stay, and then obviously this nice kind of panoramic is strong at the top here.
Okay, that's helpful. So maybe just sprinkling them throughout, not necessarily tying them together with the water.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the other thing I was going to say about the landing page is there are some modules like the Meet Billy section, the project section, that starts to lean a little towards, like, it feels a little like sales pitchy or retail leaning, where you're kind of like getting through these nice images, and then it goes right into almost seeming like you're selling a service. Billy, like, I think keep that for your about page. I think the project tab could be incorporated elsewhere as well. Maybe that is just in a tab up here at the top where you have your projects, or maybe it's blended into where you have your BTS stuff. And I'll get more into how I think that could be organized in a moment. But I think that for the overview page, you want to start with images. Let the images do the talking, and don't kind of inflate the landing page with too much additional context of language and copy for people to read. I had noted that I think that potentially having something where it feels cluttered with all of these different modules here, and even like the let's work together here, like you have your contact info in your footer here. It feels redundant to have this here as well.
Okay, that's helpful.
And then I think that, in terms of what to retain, like we said, like I think these hero images are great. As long as that's a strong edit and features all the best stuff, that's giving it a nice overview. I think that goes well hand in hand with this kind of grid edit as in addition to that. But yes, I would keep it minimal, have some more breathing room between the images, larger images, and some probably sparser text and language for people to get through here, because really you want someone to land on your site and have them want to see more of your work, not necessarily get into too much reading or sales pitchy stuff right off the bat.
Okay, anything here I should retain? Maybe a small bio, or do you think it should primarily be images on the landing page?
What I think you could have here is maybe more of like a call to action type scenario, where maybe towards the bottom, like you're saying here, let's work together. This could be something similar to like a mission statement. And maybe that's all it is it's a call to action. And then that could link directly to your about or contact pages where they can get, this module.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, because you keep in mind, like, it's always good to have this footer here with like a site map. And if you have all of that information here, you don't want to almost like arbitrarily inflate the content on the page. Having that simplicity and that minimalism, I think, is going to go a long way for something like the overview page here.
Cool.
And then moving on here, let me see what I have next in my notes. I know I'm bouncing back and forth between a lot of different things.
I followed just fine. That was all real helpful stuff.
Great. The next thing that I had noted too is like, once you jump in terms of your UI and like navigation, I do think that the current structure has strong potential, but it does suffer from a little bit of that over narration on the landing page. Some redundant navigation. So the one thing I noticed here is that if you go to the portfolios page here, for example, obviously you had an overview page on your landing page, but then the portfolios page is also an overview page. So I think that is something that kind of takes me out of the presentation a little bit here. What I would suggest, and maybe this is something that you had started kind of working on in what you had just showed me earlier with the kind of redesign that you're doing, is what you had where when you click on portfolios, you get just the options for those portfolios, or you could have more of a drop-down menu option here where, in this menu, in the UI, you get these options. Because the other thing here that's happening is, once I get into this portfolios page, if I click on one of these galleries and go into lifestyle, say, okay, I'm done with the lifestyle gallery. Now I wanted to go back to look at the aviation gallery. I now would probably logically, because it's the most apparent, even though you have the small UI over here, I'm going to click on portfolios again. And now I'm back on this overview page. So, I think avoid having someone landing on this page multiple times to go and look at another gallery. It's going to create some of that kind of visual fatigue again, if they're kind of looking at the same gallery over and over.
That makes sense.
Site.
I'll give you a little bit of insight and a little bit of the reason. I do think it's a little clunky too, and I'm looking for improvements. I was thinking just getting images in front of people any way possible. So if they click on portfolios, if I just have the categories with text over top, they're not really seeing my portfolio and might, I don't know, maybe they would stick around to go through each one. But I was just thinking having images almost popping up everywhere was advantageous. But it might be a little bit too much.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I think you have the right mindset, but you're doing that with the landing page, and then you want them to be driven to the next spot and not necessarily just on another overview page. You want them to be directed at that point. And that's where your kind of editing and your sequencing comes in, is if they click into portfolios, they're going to get the option to go to one of these galleries, and then they will have more images to look at. So I would suggest avoiding that.
And part of my redesign, what I kind of landed on is just having 3 categories up top. So if you scroll to the top, and I could share my screen again, but it goes, instead of home, portfolios, projects, I have my galleries up there. So it goes, I think it's lifestyle, travel, aviation. So they're right there. And then if people want to
Absolutely.
get more specific, they can go to the footer and click on the portfolios page if they want to see an overview. But I liked it up there because it states what I focus on very clearly. So no one has to dig for that, and it's just easily navigable.
Yeah, and I think that that's the next best option here is having these options readily available in your primary navigation, because then there's no repetition in going to portfolios and getting that additional overview page. They can jump directly to what they're looking for, because you're always going to have certain clients, especially when you get into more commercial advertising, high-end photography like that you're going to have clients and producers and creative directors that come to your site looking for a specific thing. They want to see your aviation work. So having that readily available is a good idea, whether that's in a drop-down menu or if it's just in the primary navigation at the top here. If you have a creative director for, a helicopter or an airplane or aerospace, anything like that, and they know that that's what they came here to see, then they can just jump straight to that gallery. And, I think that it's great to have it down here in the footer, but keep in mind, you have limited attention span for when those types of people end up on your site, that you don't want them to have to come down here to find the aviation thing or rely on that they'll even see it down here.
Right. That was my thinking of getting them right up top and having those broad overarching categories. And the aviation was important because it's the specialty. So I wanted to have that dedicated site. And I wanted to make a note. I custom developed the whole site. So if you have any ideas of just implementation of any features that you haven't seen anywhere else, I can usually figure out a good way to do it. So I'm open. I'm avoiding the drop down a little bit. I could always do it, but it just on mobile it gets a little buggy, and I like the simplicity of not having it. I messed with it, but it was always an annoying. I clicked out of it, and I just hate that UI issue.
And I think that the other thing to keep in mind with the drop down menu is it is going to be like unique to just that portfolios tab, so it might almost not feel right. I kind of am leaning towards what you said, is if that's something you're considering, having these portfolio options at the top of the page is a great substitute for a drop-down menu. And we can even look here like at some of the templates that I was kind of favoriting with you in mind. These are all Squarespace. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of other platforms out there that you can do the similar types of layouts with, but
more design.
Exactly. And I think that, we've already talked about it, but having some of that breathing room between images is really nice sometimes. This one's kind of perfectly laid out in a grid. I don't know that that's necessarily something you need to do here, but what I'm talking about, some simplicity, like having, basic tabs at the top, having an Instagram link, a contact link. This is somewhere where you could even put your titles. Maybe that's down at the bottom here, but I'm more looking at this one in terms of liking the breathing room between these images.
Yeah, I see that.
Same with this one. And I think this one is a little closer to what you're doing now, is this masonry grid where it's still kind of juxtaposing with different image sizes and aspects, but it has a little bit more breathing room. And you also have, the likes of that same kind of navigation up top here, where here's the home page, an overview page, et cetera, people, things, contact, et cetera. I mean, this could be as many things as you want it to be, but I think just the simplicity of direction here, name, overview, portfolios, contact, about, Instagram links, is really nice here because it's just very clean to get through. It isn't tiring. There isn't a ton of information or copy for me to read through. I just came here to look at the images, and that's what I'm getting.
Okay, I see that. Yeah, it's very simple.
Let me look through some of the others. There's some others too. Like, I think, you could go bolder with them. This one is really interesting. I thought it could be, cool to play around with this if you're finding, as you're kind of developing your portfolio, you might not have a ton of images that are really strong to show right off the bat. This is a scenario which I think I was mentioning earlier, is you're kind of doing more with less. It's a really tight edit and they're really strong images, and they have some nice breathing room between them because they're kind of custom positions on the page. And even though there's only 6 images on this page, it feels like there's narrative here. There's storytelling going on, and I'm getting a sense of what this photographer is into and what their capabilities are, what their style is. And I think that that's something to keep in mind as you are kind of maybe doing some more personal projects. You're editing down your galleries. You're kind of picking out all the strongest work that you have. At the end of the day, maybe that is just a handful of images for a hospitality or travel gallery. And maybe you need to do more with less. I think that this is a potential option to explore. Is have almost exaggerated spacing between images.
Yeah, I see that. It's a lot more than I ever thought of doing, but no, it puts your focus on the images and the narrative they tell.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this is suggestions. I think that you know, you will make the best choices based on the work that you have available to you. But you know, you want to have options and different ideas to kind of work from. This one, I think I was looking at just because it incorporated some larger images on this kind of landing page here, and I think that this is kind of what you're doing now. But I liked the simplicity of the UI on top here, and then maybe having, you know, if you do want to have some copy or a call to action at the top of your page or at the bottom of your page, I thought this was a nice way to implement that.
Okay. Yeah, but still white space and it's not overly cluttered.
This one's a little more aggressive. You know, I think you could take it or leave it. I think that this is a specific way of showing like navigation, where a landing page, the background is kind of what you already have here on your home page of this kind of like really impactful, strong imagery. And then your UI could potentially be layered over top of that. Like, you know, maybe this is lifestyle, aviation, travel, etc. I think it's an interesting way to go about it. I don't know that it's for every photographer, but something to keep in mind.
Okay.
And then this last one here, I think this is just reiterating the simplicity thing I was going for. This one, I think, is doing similar to what you're doing now, where there isn't as much breathing room. And I'm not necessarily talking about this photographer's images or anything like that. I mean, I think this edit's fine. I'm more talking about like the actual template layout itself. I like seeing this very clear, bold navigation at the top here, having links that if I am just interested in going to your LinkedIn or sending you an email, something like that, or your Instagram. This one, I think, it works well having these tighter images together because of the edit here primarily. But, you know, I think with a simple kind of minimalistic template here, you could make the tighter space work. I still would lean towards having a little bit more breathing room, though.
Okay. Okay. That's what I'm leaning towards too.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too here is like, even though this navigation isn't, you know, there isn't anything crazy going on with it, it stands out more and it's a lot more legible. I think the one thing that caught me with yours is your text is a little small. I might make that a little larger. And I think like
font choice maybe too.
Yeah, exactly. You might have some more spacing in the font or the in the typeface. Even like your navigation buttons here, like for view portfolios, like this is very small down in the bottom of my screen there. So I think like maybe just beefing up the size of that navigation.
What size monitor are you on?
So I'm on the MacBook 14-inch monitor. I mean, it's the general whatever that is, like 10 something.
Because I develop on my laptop, and I'm thinking I might have just not thought about that size. So I'm gonna look at that because it looks very small coming through, and I don't like it. So I'm, probably gonna adjust that.
But it might look different on everybody's monitors. So I think just to err on the side of caution when you're developing UI, because you almost want it to be bigger than it needs to be in a lot of cases because of something like this, where my resolution might be turned up that day. I might have like a lot of other stuff on my screen, and I might not even see this view portfolios button down here.
Yeah, it looks tiny, and I can develop it where it corresponds to the screen size, so it should be definitely bigger there. So okay, I'm gonna revisit that all around the site.
And then, you know, I think that in terms of like template, I think the rest of this is fine. Navigationally speaking, I think that you have clear paths to your about page. I think that's great. This is what I was saying. Like, I think this could just live here. That doesn't need to be on your overview page. The one thing I had noted about this too is like backstage pass. I think it's great to have the BTS stuff here. I was thinking potentially you could also have that projects module here as well. Even if you have that as a tab up top, I think it's nice to have those images attached to them. The behind the lens thing feels a little arbitrary to me. Like, I thought originally maybe this was a link to somewhere else. I think that this could potentially just be an image of you, like rather than inflating the copy here with something else outside of the about. I think that this image is great and it shows like a little bit more about you in action, you know, with the helicopter. But I think this almost felt like out of place here. So maybe that's just something to think about.
It doesn't add much value, the copy there either. It's just more.
Well, and I think that I was thinking like, oh, is this a link to like a behind the scenes gallery? And I was clicking here, you know, in my first pass, and then I realized, oh no, this is the behind the scenes stuff here. So I think that's the other thing to watch out for is just don't confuse anybody, obviously, but also, like less is more sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway here. Okay.
Cool. So let's dive into the other stuff that I was looking at in terms of what I can recommend based on, even though that there's the randomization going on in the galleries at the moment, we can still talk about things that might work and might not work. So we already touched on, you know, helicopter obviously standing out from the rest of these images. The next thing I was going to say is look out for, you know, redundant imagery or duplicate imagery across the site. Sometimes you might have one of these images from the overview page that might also live in the lifestyle gallery or the aviation gallery or the travel gallery. And that's fine for the overview page. But I would say be careful about having images from other galleries featured in other galleries. So essentially, like, you know, yes, this image of the image of the girl jumping in the water, people on the ocean, all of that stuff, like those could really fit in lifestyle. They could fit in travel, but find the best place for them and keep them there. You know, you want it to be justified contextually. Choose the strongest image per each concept and not having that in multiple places. And that could be, you know, likewise for the gallery itself, like, you know, flag similar images or duplicate shots from similar shoots and kind of trim them aggressively for that clarity.
Okay.
Looking at this stuff, here's where I was going to get into a little bit of the processing. Like this image of the tennis player is a great shot and it's like really great action, but it feels like the editing is almost flatter than everything else. So I think that that's something to look out for. You know, maybe this is just a matter of reprocessing this image, but I think that what you'll find is when you are kind of working on, you know, almost like this cohesive visual style, you want to kind of commit to like a signature post-processing style that aligns with like those commercial advertising aesthetics. So, you know, polished, cinematic, color consistent. And you want to avoid stuff that feels over processed or stuff that has like these flat editorial tones like this. Unless it's
there's some examples you could pick out of ones that maybe do a great job of that more advertising feel and edit, and maybe some that really are missing the mark, just to try to calibrate my brain and some of those editing styles.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that like in this image itself, there's a great juxtaposition of one that I think could be reprocessed and one that's doing it really well is this image here of the couple. I think this feels very, commercialized. There's warm poppy colors. You have some coolness in the lighting around them. You have these saturated clothing colors and background in the green and in the reds. I think that this feels processed much more like a commercial advertising image than even this one does. This feels a little bit more flat than I would want it to. Like the yellow feels a little desaturated. The skin feels a little cold, almost like less lifelike. And I think that a lot of it is probably coming from the cool blue of the background. But, you almost have like this image of the tennis player and then the bright yellow tennis ball that should almost pop out way more aggressively from that blue background.
You're right. I'm starting to see that now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's something to look out for. There was another one too, like when we're looking at some of these images where you have like and this is more of a pacing thing too. Like you have the boxer here. This feels like similar to the tennis player where it's a little too desaturated and there's just not enough warmth there, as opposed to the image right next to it with the yachts on the water. Like there's this warm kind of sunshine going on. And I think that that's like, it's kind of conflicting. It's working against each other in that scenario.
Gotcha. Okay.
Let's go back here to, I guess we can move right on to the portfolios page. And this is really from that overview portfolios page. But, this is what I was saying about thinking about what kind of visually and consistently goes together in an edit. You have the skyline here, the lightning, which is like a really cool, impactful image. But then it's next to like a basketball game. And then after that, it's like yachts on the water. It just feels like these are so disjointed in the way that they ended up in this sequence. And I know that that's not a conscious decision that you made because this is randomized, but this is an example of something to look out for in your pacing. Same with
how it's being
viewed,
here. So it makes an impact. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Same with the children next to the helicopter pilots. Like you have this like smiling child, and then it's this very kind of technical, serious interior of a cockpit.
Yeah,
that kind of juxtaposition just doesn't feel like it coalesces the right way.
Got it. Okay.
This we already had talked about, looking out for almost too much similarity in the composition and poses. Like there's a couple aspects here. Obviously, like it's a very similar composition because it's the girls kind of hugging and smiling, looking down. But then you also have this similarity in like the depth of the image. Like it's almost taken from the exact same distance, like arm's length away. I think that's something else to look out for in your edits is maybe, seeing some of these further away shots, like these girls here in the street. That's really cool. The guy in the kayak, that's awesome. And then you're kind of having this more intimate moment here with the guys eating and laughing with the family. And then you kind of have this mid-range stuff going on here with the woman in front of the display. But watch out for like these three images here at the bottom feel like it's from the exact same distance. So focus on, when you're creating your sequences down the road, focus on having some tight shots, some wider shots, some more detailed shots, and then some general, portrait length shots. Like I think that even that kind of variation is going to break up the gallery and make it a lot more, feel like visually diverse and more dynamic almost, if that makes sense.
It does. I was gonna ask, what are some methods that you can tie the images together? I've heard by color. What are some other examples just that I can start training on and keeping in mind as I'm arranging these?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like in terms of composition, having too much similar composition is what you should avoid. Having the variation in angles, and even in the lifestyle galleries, having similar color temperatures obviously is going to be great. Like, I think the image of the girls hugging here and then the girls in the street is really nice. That blends really well. And that even goes together well with the color temperatures in the group at the table here. The one here with the kayak, the kid on the water, that's a really nice image, but the hues here are starting to lean into the green because obviously there's a lot more grass and greenery and trees and water in that image. So that almost feels out of place in the sequence. That might blend a little bit better actually with the blues and greens in this image where you're seeing the door and you have some cooler color temperatures on her. And I think that these two images actually work next to each other just fine, even though they're completely different types of images. I think that these go well together because of the colors involved. Even though you do have some of that warmth here, you know, I'm seeing more so the consistency between the blues and greens in the background and in the boat and in his shorts with like the backgrounds here.
Okay, I see that. Yeah, or it's complementary. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to put a thumb on it, but yeah. Okay.
But also thinking about the content too. I mean, at the end of the day, like, think to yourself, does it make sense to see a kid in a kayak next to a woman standing in front of a store display? Like, what is the narrative here? Am I talking about a specific location, destination? Like, is she shopping and then there's also kayaking involved? You know, like, you have to almost like make up a narrative in your head because obviously you know the context of all these images and you might have an attachment to them or an understanding to them that nobody else is going to have when they come to your site.
Yeah.
So you almost have to think like an outside observer when you approach this stuff.
Okay. Real quick, could I show you the two I've organized the lifestyle and travel galleries, and maybe you could just give real quick input on, on the flow, I think more the narrative that I'm conveying. There we go, share. And okay, so you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I briefly went through this one. We'll start with the lifestyle. So my thinking behind here is a lot of color similarities, and I think this is pretty much the order here, but let's just look at this because I think I changed a little. So let me know your thoughts as I'm going through here and tell me if you want me to stop, scroll, or anything.
Yeah, keep on going because this is already feeling a little better. I had said like maybe the kids felt a little cooler and maybe they could just be warmed up a bit to match with everything else. But in terms of content and consistency and composition, this is already feeling really good.
Okay.
You know,
are the kids okay next to each other with the red?
Yeah, and I think that in terms of consistency and sequencing, that's fine because it's tying those images together. You know, it's young kids. There's smiles. There's, you know, activity. Yeah, silliness. Like those go well together and fit fine in the context of a lifestyle gallery. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then I keep the warm tone. So these are the two. That color looks very similar. That's why I went with those. And then keeping those warms a little bit. It's green, but it's sunset light, so we have the yellows, and I try to get variation, expressions, types of people.
And these tie together really well. Yeah.
Okay, so better there. How's this photo? I'm still a little unsure about.
I think that that's fine, and I think it works well actually next to the couple crossing the street there. Like this is kind of what I meant is like you kind of have this depth in the couple shot where they're a little bit further back, and then you have this more intimate, tighter shot of the woman getting wine poured for her, and then even further down here you're pulling back even further, and I like that kind of drifting in and out as you go through the sequences.
Right, and I tried. It was like a wave a little bit with just the feel, the vibe. I like these two next. It was similar excitement. That was my reasoning there.
Yeah, that was
still keeping that works. Okay.
Yeah, and then it starts to cool off a little bit down towards the bottom here. Like it does, some of that warmth comes away, even though you're still getting that bright kind of airy, sunshiny feeling. It's almost more of like a cool light now. And I think that worked well. Even that graduation image, like I think the color consistency carries through much better than in the example that we were looking at earlier.
Okay. And then narrative wise, it's working. There's no disjoint. Right?
Yeah, because in terms of a lifestyle gallery, I mean, you want to focus on brand level storytelling. So, like people engaging with their environments, authentic moments, authentic expressions, the strong lighting, which you're showing, and these kind of varying compositions, different activities, like the kids making silly faces, the girls dancing in the street, and then you have some more traditional stuff where maybe that's the girl in the park posing there with the skirt on, like. And then the people sitting on the Corvette with their backs to each other laughing, like that kind of variation in emotion and expression and scenery and light. I think that is leaning much closer to what I would want to see for, brand storytelling, brand narrative, commercialization. And I think that you really come leaps and bounds with this gallery compared to what we were looking at. Yeah, I think.
Okay, good. I spent a lot of time in just trying to learn sequencing. One thing I really try to convey is authenticity through like realistic scenes. So most of these pictures are really try to keep realistic, relatable.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then going into travel, and this is how I have this thing in the way here. This is what I was thinking. So just a quick navigation, and then I keep these tabs here.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely.
That works.
That works well. Yeah.
Is that one in lifestyle? I think that one was in lifestyle. Yeah, it was. I could work on that. But yeah, going into the travel, it's a relatively new category. I really would like to do more travel lifestyle work. So that's why I'm really focusing my energy on here and looking for opportunities for test shoots. But this is the order I come up with. Similar strategic structuring as we talked about in the lifestyle, but I'll briefly go through.
Yeah.
But let me know your thoughts, narrative especially.
Yeah, this is starting to feel a lot better than the edit that was the original site, and a lot of these were ones that I had marked out as strong ones to keep. The one call out I will say that I had noted about the current travel gallery, the one that's like live on the site, like not necessarily sequence, but the content of what's in there, is being careful that you're not showing too many kind of static landscapes and like generalized anywhere shots. Like the plateau there is great. I think the one with the palm trees and the waterfront, like it just feels like it could be anywhere. You're not really telling a story with that image, if that makes sense.
Okay, compared to this one, this might be a little bit more of a story.
Right, so exactly. Because like that's a very specific activity happening there. You want to avoid images that, especially in travel galleries, that feel too much like vacation snapshots. Like you don't, and I know that's blunt. That's a blunt way of putting it, but that is like, you want to avoid stuff that's going to be like, someone snapping a picture of like a nice scene while they're on vacation, as opposed to something like that with all the people on the beach and then the hotel right there. Like that's really like telling a story of like a place. Like look at how many people are packed on this beach, and like look at this crazy hotel or resort right behind them. Like that's great.
A story.
Yeah. And even that one of the woman walking there with her back to us, I had highlighted that one as a favorite too, because it's telling a story of movement, of journey between places, like thinking about people arriving or departing or transit or wandering between places and seeing the sights. Like that's what you have to start looking for in your travel gallery if you want to attract clients like Marriott and these hotel groups or airlines, stuff like that, because it almost becomes like more about the editorial energy of telling the story of these places, like emphasizing experiences in these locations, thinking about interactions, the atmosphere, the people, the food, the transportation, getting from one place to the other. And that is where you want to highlight these subjects or moments tied to those specific places, because that's what travel, that's what travel photography is going to need to look like for you to kind of get those clients on your radar.
Right. Okay. So like maybe taking out images like these vacation snapshots. I get that. It's a little bit bland in storytelling.
Yeah, because it almost feels, like I said, it feels like it could be anywhere, even though that's a very specific like image of a waterfront and a canalway. Like, yes, that feels very European or, very specific to that location. But, it doesn't feel like it's telling me anything about that place other than it's just a nice image of that area.
This one's very similar. It's just around the street here, but I feel like this does tell a little bit more of the story.
Yeah, exactly. That feels like there's more going on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because it's it's like that's tourism. That's what it looks like, and I think that's telling that story. But even like the last one here, like the highway, like that's a very general like shot, and nothing against you and the millions of other photographers who have taken that image, but what I'm saying there, right?
Oh, there's millions, definitely. That's
fine. So that's just what to look out for, because that's great as a strong kind of profile or portfolio image, but you're not necessarily telling a story with that image at that point.
Yeah, I see.
Whereas opposed to that, like the image above it with the longboat and the waterfront there, like that, even though it is just kind of a landscape shot or a snapshot, that feels like really specific to that location, and it just feels
character.
More characterizing of that location. And that brings us back to the authenticity side of things too, which is the last note I had about the travel galleries, is thinking about the culture, those human interactions. So that's why, like, the people with the backpacks and the stroller, like those human interactions and experiences in those places, the details, the cuisine, specific environments, the locals, like interacting with the locals, like stuff like that, like that's all going to tell that story.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I think we got 5 minutes left. Any other
I still have a bunch to cover. If you go over a little while.
I can go over. I don't want to have you go over. No, that's time. Okay. No, I appreciate anything you have. It's been immensely helpful so far. So thank you. Yeah. I'll let you lead the rest of it, just so you can get through your stuff then.
Yeah. I don't have too much more, but yeah, I want to make sure we cover everything for the
Should I give the screen to you real quick, or you want me to...
I'll take back over actually.
There we go.
I'm gonna jump into the aviation gallery too, because I know we didn't get to touch on that.
That's right. Yeah.
So for the aviation gallery, I think this one obviously is going to be like it's a niche, right? So like obviously this is what I would expect to see in an aviation gallery. The one thing that I had jotted down as a note, and this is again because of the randomization, is to watch out for scenarios where the same composition pops up. Like you see the helicopters, they're facing the same direction. It feels like the same distance. This I know is not a conscious decision in this scenario, but be careful for that in your edits. And I'm just reiterating what I said before about, even though they're different images, they're obviously different helicopters. They're all facing to the left here, and they feel from the same distance away. Whereas like stuff like this, like these aggressive angles, like him looking down, this guy looking up, the over top, in the clouds, inside the cockpit, head on the runway, like that's great because that's showing so many different ways to photograph like a static object, which is difficult to do. Like you want to show these different types of things in different ways that doesn't end up just being the same image repeated over and over again.
So maybe one of those angles, I know I have so many, and it was more just trying to build my portfolio with more content because it's hard to get on some of these shoots. But I'm thinking maybe limiting it to just one of those angles, maybe two.
I don't think necessarily even needing to eliminate them. I just think make sure they get broken up among the sequencing and don't land next to each other. The other thing I was going to say, and I touched on it earlier about how to kind of work this type of stuff into your other work that you're doing, like the lifestyle or travel or something like that, is think about how you might be able to do some personal projects within the aviation field. Like, maybe that is a couple arriving at a helicopter tour, or the storytelling of getting from point A to point B in a helicopter and what happens when they land, what else is going on there that makes it about the journey and the editorial aspect of telling the narrative of like a trip or a couple's getaway with a helicopter, or maybe they're going from one place to the other and it's about that trip. But thinking about those kinds of ideas, and bringing that lifestyle aspect into it,
Okay, yeah, I get that. Okay.
And then the other thing too with the travel stuff is like, think about potentially like a personal project where you just give yourself a brief. Maybe it's like 72 hours in Flagstaff or something like that. And that's how you kind of can build that travel portfolio. Because when you think about travel, like it goes back to what I was saying, like you want to be telling the story of a place. You want to be kind of getting the gist across of like, what is the culture there? What is there to do? What are people doing when they go there? And I think that that's just something to keep in mind when you're kind of developing these personal projects, is just give yourself a brief as if you were told to go capture a place for 72 hours or 48 hours, and work with what you find there.
Okay. And that, and then some of the photos you're seeing in the gallery that are more storytelling, is that what producers would hire a travel photographer for? Am I hitting that correctly, or is it misaligned at all?
It would all be based on what the needs are for that project. I mean, I think that obviously the content and the editing and the way it's presented is one aspect of appealing to those types of clients or those types of projects. And then there's obviously the quality of the images themselves. And I don't think that quality-wise there's anything bad here in this gallery. I think that it's just a matter of how you're showing it in the context of like, a travel editorial. Because like, a hotel, obviously, if you were working for Hilton, they aren't necessarily just going to want images of the beachfront at their hotel. They're going to want to tell the story of the rest of the attractions in that location. So you could almost have these like project themes where, maybe part of it is about the local food, the cuisine. Maybe some of it is about the beachfront or what you can do on the water there. Then there's the locals and interacting with the people that are around that area, or getting to and from places. Maybe you're taking a carriage ride to get somewhere, like thinking about the unique aspects of places rather than, like I said, watch out for the snapshots. That's all.
Okay. That gave me some good ideas actually in the flow. Yeah, that was good.
Okay. And then the last thing I think I was looking at here would just be the sports gallery, because I know you had talked about this in your
I'm thinking of taking it out. So the reason I have it in there is it's the peak action. I've had clients really say, oh, we saw your sports and you've really captured the peak action. That's why we want to hire you. But it's so hard to make money in it. I've kind of gotten out of it. I have a passion for it. I don't know if it's worth including, especially if I'm going towards that lifestyle travel route. But
I think if you're not like, one thing I would say is, since it is so different from everything else that you're going for, I mean, the sports documentary stuff, like this image here feels pretty commercial. Like that could go into a lifestyle gallery.
Yeah, that's one of my newer ones, right? Yeah. And I might do that. But everything else is pretty old and sports action.
Exactly. Yeah, it feels documentary style, and I think that if you have a place for it in your business, keep it on the website, but maybe it's not a primary gallery. Maybe it's in like an other tab or an archive tab. That's not
what I was thinking.
First and forefront. Because I mean, you don't necessarily want to like not let people know that you're capable of doing this stuff if the right project comes along. But if it's not what you're aiming to get more of, then I would potentially think about maybe tucking it away somewhere and picking some of the best stuff out of here. Obviously, like, the more commercial stuff here. I think even like the surfer is good for lifestyle or travel even. Okay. The other stuff, right. I think some of the other stuff obviously is more documentary.
Okay. Helpful.
Yeah. And then
great. I think we made it through.
I think that wraps up like everything I had for our call. Obviously, I'm gonna give you like a full workup of notes for all of this as well that you can kind of use as reference, because it kind of will organize things a little bit better than us bouncing back and forth between so many things. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna send that along with the video recording. And then if there's more to talk about I'm more than happy to, you know, find some extra time to work together. We can always think about next steps. I think that, like I said, you know, the next thing to start working on, and you already have, obviously, is working on your sequencing, getting the website tuned up, and, you know, maybe getting rid of that randomization, which it seems like you've already started to move towards.
I agree with you too.
And then after that, yeah, I mean, start thinking about some personal projects, building the portfolio. I know travel is a big thing that you want to get more work in. So I think personal projects are going to be necessary there for the time being. Yeah.
Okay. And that narrative, and like last year, I just did a solo backpacking trip. That's where a lot of the pictures came from, and it led to a lot of great stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. More stuff like that. And like I said, give yourself a brief, you know, you be the client and the photographer. Like, this type of image is great. Like, I think this is nailing like what I would want to see, you know, in like a Condé Nast Traveler article. You know, like, this is the kind of commercial travel imagery that I would expect to see, because it's like such like a moment that's specific to a place, even though it could be anywhere. Yeah, but like, it's so unique to see like the clothing out on the line, and then the woman in the crazy dress kind of walking down this very old kind of like back alley. Like, that's I think what the kind of storytelling that I want to see more of in these galleries.
Okay. Yeah, I barely lifted my camera up for that one. I'm glad I did. It was just walking down the street. I was tired, but yeah, that was a neat one.